At my sister-in-law's wedding reception, my husband stood up from the head table, lifted his glass, and told the entire room, "You are not family to us. You came here to eat for free." Then he ordered the server not to give me a single plate of food. For a moment, everything stopped. The music faded into the background, conversations died mid-sentence, and every face in the ballroom turned toward me with the same stunned silence. You could feel the air tighten, as if the entire evening had suddenly shifted off its axis. And then, from behind me, a distinguished man with white hair, someone I had never seen before, leaned close and whispered, "Take my arm. They will swallow their tongues when they see who you're with." Hello. Before you share your story, please comment below where you are listening to it. I'm curious to know if you are listening to it while drinking your morning coffee or relaxing in the evening. For a moment, the entire ballroom went silent, as if someone had pulled the plug on the music. Then, whispers slithered across the tables like snakes. His mother, Doña Carmina, narrowed her eyes with a look I had grown too familiar with. Superiority dipped in venom. His sister, Marcella, the bride in her pearl-studded gown, bit her lip to hide a smirk. And I, sitting at table 32, the only table without centerpieces, pushed against a wall near the kitchen doors, felt every bone in my body lock in place. I hadn't eaten all day. I had worked overtime at the bakery to finish invoices before rushing here, sewing the hem of my simple blue dress by hand, because Alejandro told me last week, "Do not buy anything new. We don't have money for your nonsense." But his family wore gold like armor, and they looked at me as if poverty itself had slipped into their celebration. A young server approached me timidly, balancing a platter of roasted salmon. "Ma'am, would you like—" she began. But Alejandro slammed his hand over her tray before she could finish, knocking it sideways so that a piece of salmon slid off and landed at my feet. Gasps rose from the tables. The girl flinched. "Do not serve her," he barked, glaring down at me with bloodshot eyes. "She doesn't deserve a plate. Let her sit there and watch real family eat." Laughter erupted from Marcella's bridesmaids, their sequin dresses sparkling as if joy came to them easily, naturally, as if cruelty was entertainment. I breathed in sharply, tasting humiliation like iron on my tongue. My hands trembled on my lap, but I kept my chin high the way my abuela once told me. "When the world throws dirt at you, don't bend. Let it fall off your shoulders." But Alejandro wasn't finished. He leaned over me, so close I could smell the mix of whiskey and some floral perfume that didn't belong to me, and hissed, "Stop pretending. You were never one of us. You came here to eat off my mother's money. Go home, Emilia. Or better yet, leave this family once and for all." He straightened up, laughing loudly, as if he had performed a show. The band stopped again, mid-song, unsure whether to continue. Guests exchanged glances, shocked, pitying, entertained. But none stood up for me. Not one. My face burned as though someone had pressed a hot iron against my skin. My throat tightened, my body frozen between fight and collapse. That moment, that single moment, cracked something inside my chest. And then, just as Alejandro turned his back, satisfied, Something in the atmosphere shifted, like a current, like the air itself inhaled. A tall man with silver white hair, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, stepped out from the shadows near the exit doors. I had never seen him before, not in any family gathering, not in any San Antonio event, not in any photo frame in their mansion. He carried himself with a calm authority, so powerful that the crowd parted without him asking. He walked straight toward my lonely table, his black leather shoes silent on the marble floor. He didn't look at Alejandro. He didn't acknowledge the whispers. He didn't even blink at the spilled salmon near my heels. His eyes, cold, sharp, unnervingly steady, locked onto mine, and without a word, he extended his arm, not offering, commanding. The room held its breath. I stared at him, confused, shaken, caught between fear and something that felt dangerously like safety. He lowered his head slightly, leaning toward my ear. His voice was a low, controlled murmur, but in the hush of the ballroom, every syllable resonated like a verdict. "Take my arm, Senora," he said, "and watch how quickly they swallow their tongues." My heart pounded unevenly, like a trapped bird behind my ribs. I looked past him, saw Alejandro freeze mid-stride, saw Doña Carmina clutch the lace edge of her shawl, saw Marcela's smug smile vanish. They knew this man. Or rather, they feared him. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know why he appeared. I didn't know how he knew my name. But I did know one thing. Humiliation had reached its limit. Something inside me, a voice I had silenced for years, rose from the ashes of my dignity and whispered, "Stand up." So I placed my trembling hand on his arm. The fabric of his suit was cool, impossibly smooth. Instantly, he pulled me to my feet with a steady, unyielding strength. The ballroom erupted into a frenzy of whispers. "Is that him?" someone muttered. "What is he doing with her?" The man lifted his chin and swept the room with an expression that didn't need words to command silence. Without releasing me, he said, loud enough for everyone, "We're leaving." But he didn't guide me toward the exit. No. With absolute confidence, he turned and walked me straight toward the center of the ballroom, toward the stage where the microphone stood waiting like a witness. Alejandro staggered forward, face flushed. "Hey, who the hell are you? Don't touch my wife!" But two massive security guards appeared from nowhere, blocking him with the precision of men who didn't ask questions. They simply obeyed. The silver-haired man didn't even glance back. He escorted me up the stage, each step echoing across the marble floor like the beating of a war drum. The band members scrambled out of the way. The guests leaned forward in stunned silence. When we reached the microphone, he positioned himself beside me, one hand still holding my arm firmly, as if declaring publicly that I was under his protection. Then he spoke, his voice calm, resonant, authoritative. "Buenas noches. My name is Rafael Cortez." A gasp rippled across the ballroom. Someone whispered, "El dueño, the owner of this venue?" Another voice followed. "No, he owns half the hotels in Bayard County." Rafael Cortez waited for the murmur to settle. Then he said, "And I believe this celebration needs an immediate correction. And that That was the moment my nightmare began to turn into something else entirely. But to understand how I ended up on that stage, with a man like Rafael Cortez reclaiming my dignity in front of the people who tried to crush it, we need to go back 2 hours earlier. When people ask me what it feels like to lose your dignity in front of 200 witnesses, I wish I could tell them it happened suddenly, like a lightning strike, sharp and blinding. But humiliation rarely arrives that way. No, it begins quietly, hours or even years, before everyone else sees it, like a slow leak under a house, rotting the foundation long before the floor collapses. 2 hours before Rafael Cortez walked me onto that stage, before Alejandro's voice shattered what was left of my pride, I was standing alone in the bridal suite hallway of the Palacio de Águila, smoothing the hem of my dress, a dress I had sewn myself after midnight, 3 nights in a row, because Alejandro insisted we couldn't afford nonsense like new clothes. I told myself blue was a respectful color for a wedding, that simple was elegant, that I didn't need sequins or beads to belong. But as I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, framed by ornate gold molding, I saw the truth. I looked like I had wandered into the wrong world. Everywhere around me, women glided in gowns dripping with Swarovski crystals. Men in tailored suits clinked glasses of aged tequila, and laughter floated through the air as waiters passed trays of canapes shaped like tiny roses. This wasn't a wedding reception, it was a parade of wealth, the kind Alejandro's family curated like a museum exhibit. I took a slow breath and reminded myself why I came. I wasn't here for them. I was here because despite everything, years of silent dinners, nights of cold distance, Alejandro brushing past me like a ghost, I still believed in marriage vows. I still believed in staying. I still believed that perhaps tonight, in this extravagant place, he might remember that I was his wife, not a shadow. A sudden burst of laughter erupted from inside the bridal suite. I heard Marcella's voice, sharp, high-pitched, dripping with smug amusement. Amelia's dress looks like something from a thrift store. Another voice chimed in. Why did Alejandro marry that woman anyway? She's so plain. A third added. Carmina should have found him someone from a proper family. The laughter stung, not because their judgment was new, but because their cruelty was so casual, so effortless. They weren't even trying to whisper. I backed away from the door, swallowing the lump in my throat, wishing I could go home, curl up on my small couch with a cup of chamomile tea, and forget this day. But leaving early would only give them more to talk about. So, instead, I walked down the hallway toward the balcony overlooking the courtyard. San Antonio's late spring breeze brushed my face, warm and sweet with the faint scent of blooming jasmine. Down below, workers were arranging lanterns around the fountain for the evening photos. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the air cool the burn under my ribs. My phone buzzed in my small purse. A message from Alejandro. Where are you? You're late. My mother is asking. No, hi, no. Are you okay? No acknowledgement that he'd left me behind early this morning with dishes in the sink, and a note about how he had important things to handle before the wedding. I typed quickly, in the hallway. Coming now. His reply came instantly. Hurry! The word felt like a leash. I tucked my phone away and walked toward the ballroom entrance. As I approached, Doña Carmina stood near the double doors in a gown that shimmered like molten gold, her chin lifted the moment she saw me. "Finally," she said, not hiding her irritation. "Try not to embarrass us tonight. Marcella wants everything perfect." It took me a moment to realize she was adjusting the diamond necklace around her neck, the one she always bragged had belonged to her grandmother, even though I'd once seen the same design advertised in a high-end boutique in Austin. I nodded politely. "Yes, Doña." She eyed my dress, her lips curling into something between amusement and disgust. "You should have worn something nicer. People will think Alejandro married beneath him." I forced a soft inhale. "This is what I have." "You should have tried harder," she muttered, turning away. The truth was, I had tried. Not just with the dress, but with this family, this monolith of judgment that had spent 10 years treating me like a stray dog Alejandro had brought home out of pity. I followed her inside. The ballroom was already glowing with candles and chandeliers, violins playing softly as guests found their seats. I found mine, table 32, as if fate itself enjoyed irony. It was tucked in the farthest corner, next to the kitchen doors that swung open every few minutes with the clang of trays and the smell of onions. A waitress smiled at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, ma'am. They changed the seating chart at the last minute." I knew exactly who had changed it. And why. My presence was an inconvenience, a stain they wanted far from view. I sat quietly, folding my hands in my lap, pretending I didn't notice the sideways glances from distant cousins or the fact that Alejandro hadn't even looked my way since I entered the room. He stood at the head table, laughing loudly with Marcella's new husband, David, a man whose family owned a chain of automotive dealerships across Texas. Alejandro had adjusted his tie 3 times in the last 10 minutes and kept running his hand through his slicked back hair, the way he always did when he wanted to impress people. Not once did his eyes seek mine. Not once did he wave. Not once did he smile. A server placed glasses of wine around the tables. Mine remained empty. I considered calling Alejandro over, but the last time I interrupted him at a family event, he told me, "Don't cling. It makes you look desperate." So I stayed still, even as hunger twisted my stomach into knots, even as fatigue sat like a weight on my shoulders. Hours passed. Toasts began. Plates of steak and shrimp filled the tables. Laughter rose and fell like waves along the shore. And yet, not one server approached me. They kept passing by, avoiding eye contact, moving quickly to the other tables. After the 4th round of tray deliveries, I finally mustered the courage to stop a young waitress. "Excuse me," I whispered. "I haven't been served." She looked at my table number, then at her chart, confusion creasing her forehead. "That's strange. You're supposed to have a full setting. Let me bring you a plate." But before she could take one step toward the kitchen, a voice, the same voice that would later humiliate me on that microphone, cut through the noise like a whip. "Don't you dare serve her!" Alejandro, standing behind her, behind me, behind everything I had tried to hold together. And the rest, well, the rest you already know. But what you don't know yet is what led him to that cruelty, what he feared, what he hid, and why Rafael Cortez, the most unexpected man in Texas knew exactly when to intervene, because that night wasn't just Marcela's wedding. It was the night Alejandro's secrets finally began to bleed through the cracks. And I was the only one who saw them. People often say betrayal arrives with thunder, but in reality, it comes on soft footsteps, wearing the face you've loved for half a lifetime. Alejandro's cruelty at the wedding wasn't born in that ballroom. No, his humiliation of me was only the final symptom of a sickness that had been growing silently inside our marriage, spreading itself beneath the surface like rot in old wood. And the truth is, if you had asked me 2 weeks before that night whether my husband had secrets, I would have smiled, naive and tired, and said, "No, Alejandro works too much to have secrets." But now, looking back, every sign was screaming at me. I was just too loyal and too lonely to see them. The morning after Marcela's engagement dinner, the first crack appeared. Alejandro had returned home after midnight, still dressed in his work shirt, smelling not like the grease and dust of the construction firm where he was a supervisor, but of a cologne I didn't recognize. Fresh, musky, too youthful for him. When he walked into the house, the lights were off except for the lamp by the sofa, where I had fallen asleep waiting for him. My sewing kit lay open on the coffee table, a half-finished hem from the dress for the wedding resting on my lap. He didn't greet me. He didn't say, "I'm home." He didn't even look surprised to see me awake. Instead, he went straight to the fridge, took a bottle of water, drank half of it in one gulp, and said in a flat voice, "Why are you still up?" "I was waiting for you," I answered gently, even though I could feel something sharp rising in my chest. "You didn't answer my messages." He placed the bottle on the counter and pulled out his phone as if to prove something. "I was busy." He showed me the screen. It was empty, clear. No missed calls, no unread texts, no notifications at all. For a brief moment, I doubted myself. Did I imagine sending him those 3 messages? I remembered typing them, but his phone said otherwise. Before I could speak, he added, "Next time, sleep. I don't need you worrying like some desperate woman." Then he went upstairs without waiting for my reply. As I folded my sewing kit away that night, a strange heaviness settled in my ribs. Something felt wrong and sour, like milk left out overnight. But I pushed it aside. In marriage, especially one over 30 years old, you learn to bury discomfort the way gardeners bury stones at the edge of flower beds, quietly, carefully, pretending they don't disrupt the soil. The next sign came 3 days later. Alejandro's truck smelled different. He had asked me to bring his lunchbox to the passenger seat because he was late for work again. When I opened the truck door, a faint but distinct perfume floated out. Sweet, floral, too delicate to belong to him. It wasn't mine either. Mine has always been jasmine and citrus, the cheap kind from H-E-B that lasts 2 hours at most. This one, though, it clung to the air, expensive and romantic. I froze, lunchbox in hand, staring at the seat as if it held an answer I wasn't ready to know. Alejandro rushed past me, grabbed the lunchbox, and said, too quickly, "It's from one of the women in accounting. She spilled her perfume on the files I was carrying. He didn't even wait for my reaction before slamming the truck door and driving off. I stood there in the driveway, watching the dust rise behind the truck, tasting the bitterness of disbelief. People don't explain things that didn't happen. As the days moved closer to Marcela's wedding, the cracks multiplied. Alejandro started shaving twice a day, something he hadn't done since our early years together. He bought a new cologne without mentioning it to me, a brand far more expensive than anything we'd ever purchased. He started coming home late, always with an excuse. Deadlines, inventory counts, clients, excuses so thin I could practically see the lies beneath them. One night he came home and went straight to the shower without even touching me, as if he were washing off something he didn't want me to smell. When he stepped out, his shirt had a smear of lipstick near the collar, faint, like someone had tried to wipe it off. "What's that?" I asked softly. He glanced down, annoyed. "Paint. We were marking equipment at work." I didn't argue. I simply turned away and continued chopping onions for dinner. But my hands trembled so much that tears blurred my vision. Not from the onions, but from the realization that I was no longer a wife in his eyes. I was a placeholder, a ghost, a witness to his lies. The cruelest sign arrived the week of the wedding. He had forgotten his wallet on the kitchen counter as he rushed out. When I went to put it in his briefcase, a folded receipt fell out. It was from a restaurant in Laredo, 4 hours away. A fancy place overlooking the river, where couples went on dates or proposals. The receipt listed 2 entrees, a bottle of wine worth more than our monthly electricity bill, and a dessert for 2. The date printed was the same night he told me he was working overtime at the site near South Flores Street. My heart gave a small, painful twist, like a rope pulled too tight around its own center. I told myself it was a business meeting. I told myself he couldn't be so cruel. I told myself no marriage survives without trust. But trust is a fragile thing, and mine had just cracked open. That evening, before he came home, I took the receipt and placed it in my sewing drawer, the safest place I had. I didn't want to confront him, not yet. I wanted to know the full truth first. And truth, I would soon learn, has a way of revealing itself when the time is right. The morning of the wedding arrived with a knot in my stomach I couldn't untie. Alejandro barely spoke to me, only giving sharp instructions about where to stand, what to wear, how not to embarrass his family. He didn't notice the hurt in my eyes. He didn't notice the distance growing between us. He didn't notice the way my hands shook when I zipped my dress. But someone else noticed. Someone who, at that moment, was nothing more than a stranger in an immaculate charcoal suit, watching from a corner of the venue as I walked in alone. Someone who understood immediately what Alejandro had been trying to hide. Someone who would soon make my entire world shift. And that someone was Rafael Cortez. Most people imagine the moment of truth arrives with someone kicking down a door or a dramatic confession shouted through tears. But in my life, truth never arrived loudly. It came quietly, almost politely, like a tapping at the window, soft enough that I could pretend I hadn't heard it. But lies, those eventually pile up so high that they spill over, and the truth comes crashing through, whether you're ready or not. And 2 days before the wedding, while I was still convincing myself that Alejandro's late nights and strange perfume scents were coincidences, the truth tapped again. This time, with a hint of warning I could no longer ignore. It began with a phone call. I was in my small kitchen, kneading dough for the dulce rolls I planned to bring to the reception as a peace offering to Marcella. Because despite how she treated me, I still believed kindness could soften edges. That's when my house phone rang, the one we rarely used. I wiped flour from my hands and answered. Mrs. Emilia Vargas? A woman's voice asked. Professional, clipped, unfamiliar. Yes, I replied hesitantly. Who's calling? This is Dr. Yvonne Peña's office. I'm calling to confirm Alejandro Vargas's follow-up appointment this Thursday. My stomach sank. Follow-up for what? The woman hesitated. For the treatment plan he discussed with Dr. Peña last month. I felt my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Alejandro never mentioned any appointments, any treatments, any doctor named Peña. There must be a mistake, I said. He hasn't seen any Dr. Peña. The woman paused, and her tone shifted, as if something clicked in her mind. I see. Mrs. Vargas, could you verify the address we have on file? Perhaps there's been a mix-up. But when she read the address aloud, our exact home address, my mind went still. She wasn't wrong. Alejandro had gone somewhere he didn't want me to know about. Thank you, I managed to say before hanging up. I stood in the kitchen, the dough sticking to my palms, and felt a coldness seep into my chest like sinking slowly beneath water. What treatment was he hiding? Why did he use our address but never tell me? And why did the voice on the phone sound so cautious? Like she'd revealed something she shouldn't have? I wanted answers, but the truth wasn't done with me yet. Later that same afternoon, Alejandro returned home early, something he hadn't done in a long time. He walked into the house with an anxious energy, as if he was expecting something to explode. He didn't kiss my cheek, didn't ask about my day. He went straight to his briefcase in the living room, rifling through papers with nervous hands. Did anyone call me? He asked suddenly, without turning. I hesitated. My instinct was to lie and protect myself from confrontation. But something inside me, some stubborn part of my spirit, refused. A doctor's office called, I said quietly. Alejandro froze. His back stiffened. Slowly, he turned, forcing a smile so thin it looked painful. Spam, he said too quickly. Probably a scam calling about insurance. But his eyes told another story. Wide, alert, almost frightened. The kind of fear that doesn't come from scammers. The kind of fear that comes from being caught. Before I could speak again, he slammed the briefcase shut, grabbed his keys, and muttered, I have errands. And he was gone before I could take another breath. But he made one mistake. In his rush, he left a slip of paper on the coffee table. Folded, but not enough. I should have left it alone. A good wife might have. But I was no longer just a wife. I was a woman who felt something dark swirling around her home, like a storm forming far on the horizon. So I opened it. It was a receipt. But not from a restaurant or a gas station. It was from a legal office, Guerra and Campos attorneys in Laredo. Date, 2 weeks prior. The note section said, consultation, transfer of property, urgent, and the name under client, Alejandro Vargas. That was the moment everything inside me went still. Transfer of property, urgent. Those were not the actions of a man planning his sister's wedding. Those were the actions of a man preparing for a future without me. But the truth wasn't finished slicing. That evening, while Alejandro was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once, twice, 3 times. I had never touched his phone before. 30 years of marriage taught me boundaries, taught me trust, taught me patience. But trust without honesty is not love. It's captivity. The screen lit up with a preview of the message. Don't forget the folder. We need your signature before Friday. Marcella and your mother already handled their part. L. My breath caught in my throat. L? Who was L? Laredo? Lawyer? Lover? My mind spun. The message didn't sound like romance. It sounded like logistics. Logistics for something that involved his sister and his mother. A plan. A coordinated plan. A plan that required signatures. I stepped away from the nightstand before I could read the message fully, my pulse racing. That night, I barely slept. I lay beside Alejandro listening to him snore, as if the weight of my unraveling world meant nothing to him. And as I stared at the ceiling, a horrifying suspicion crept into my mind. Uninvited and unwelcome. They're not just hiding something from you, they're planning something against you. The next morning confirmed it. I had gone to the trunk of Alejandro's truck to place a bag of clean work gloves when I noticed a folder tucked partially under the spare tire compartment. Curiosity prickled through me, a quiet dread warming the back of my neck. I pulled it out. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Pages of printed documents, some signed, some awaiting signatures, and one sheet made my heart stop. A draft of a property transfer agreement from our house. The house I had helped pay for with every meal I cooked, every bill I handled, every overtime shift at the bakery. The house I believed belonged to both of us. The beneficiary's name wasn't mine. It wasn't even Alejandro's. It was Carmina Vargas, his mother. And the transfer date was scheduled for the Monday after the wedding. I pressed my hand against my chest, barely able to breathe. My husband wasn't planning to leave me. He was planning to erase me, remove me from the home, strip me of everything. And the wedding, the expensive, extravagant wedding, was the perfect curtain behind which to hide the final preparations. My fingers clenched around the folder. I was shaking. From anger, from betrayal, from clarity. That was the moment I finally understood. Alejandro's humiliation of me at the wedding wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't the drunken cruelty of a careless man. It was part of the plan. Publicly shame me. Publicly push me out. Publicly shatter my dignity so that, when they removed me from the house, no one would defend me. But what Alejandro didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone had already taken notice of their cruelty. Someone who had seen the signs before I even pieced them together. Someone who had been watching quietly, waiting for the right moment. Rafael Cortez. And soon, I would learn just how deep his involvement went. There is a moment in every woman's life when fear simply burns out. Not because the danger has passed, but because the heart cannot hold any more of it. Mine burned out in my driveway, standing beside Alejandro's truck, while holding the folder that proved he and his family had been planning my erasure like a business deal. I remember staring at the signatures: Carmina's looping cursive, Marcella's neat block letters, and next to spousal consent, a blank line waiting for my name, already marked with a sticky note that read, Emilia, signs here. They expected me to sign without question. They expected me to trust. They expected me to remain small. That was the last day I remained small. The moment the truth settled in my bones, something inside me clicked into place. Not anger exactly, but clarity, sharp and cold as the first breath of winter. I wasn't going to confront Alejandro. Not yet. Arguments are loud. Revenge is quiet. And if his family thought they could plan in secret, so could I. Ironically, the first person to push me in that direction was someone I barely knew. Senora Amparo, my elderly neighbor across the street, whose chihuahua barked at anything that breathed. That afternoon, unable to think, unable to breathe in my own home, I walked outside with the folder hidden in my purse. She happened to be tending her roses. Emilia, she said, adjusting her sun hat. You look pale. Come, sit. I tried to brush it off. I told her I was fine. She shook her head sharply. Women our age don't look fine when we're fine. Tell me what's wrong. And before I knew it, the words poured out, not everything, but enough. Enough for her to purse her lips and mutter, I always knew that man had a rotten streak. His eyes are too restless. I almost laughed. Almost. Then she added something that made my heart stutter. If you need help, speak to Rafael Cortez. I blinked. Who? She gave me a look of disbelief. Ay, Dios mío, niña. Everyone knows Rafael. The Cortez family built half of San Antonio's south side. Hotels, venues, commercial rentals. He's respected. Feared. But he's fair. She paused. He helped my sister when her husband tried to take her house. My breath hitched. The same Raphael who had appeared at the wedding? The man with silver hair whose presence silenced a ballroom? The man who had held out his arm as if he already knew who I was? He has no patience for men who mistreat their wives, she added, especially men who try to steal what doesn't belong to them. That night, while Alejandro snored beside me, snored like a man sleeping peacefully in the ruins he made, I stared at the ceiling and replayed the memory of Raphael's voice at the wedding, the calm command in it, the way he seemed to step directly into the path of humiliation without hesitation. He didn't look at me like I was weak. He looked at me like I was someone worth standing beside. And that was enough for me to make my first decision. I'm going to find out everything Alejandro is hiding. The next morning, while Alejandro left early for work, I searched the house. Not frantically, but methodically. The way a woman searches for a recipe she knows is hidden somewhere in a cluttered drawer. And, piece by piece, I found the truth. In his office drawer, behind old receipts and loose screws, I found a prepaid phone. Cheap, burner style, the kind no married man should ever need. My hands shook as I powered it on. Dozens of messages filled the screen, most from a single contact marked with a heart emoji and the letter L. My eyes scanned the most recent one. Can't wait for Sunday. We'll finally celebrate properly. Bring the papers. Papers. The same papers in the folder I'd found. My stomach churned, but I kept reading. Another message. Your wife won't be a problem after Monday. Mommy says it's better for everyone if she leaves quietly. Mommy. That meant Carmina. I scrolled further. Images, blurred, taken in a hotel room. A woman's hand with red nails. A champagne bottle beside two glasses. A tease of a shoulder. A shadow of someone leaning in. Then a video, only a few seconds long. Alejandro's voice. Hers faint in the background. Once Marcela's wedding is over, he said, I'll handle Amelia. She's too naive to fight back. I inhaled so sharply it hurt. Naive. That's what he thought I was. A soft woman. A quiet woman. A woman who didn't push back. He forgot quiet women carry the deepest wells of strength. I wasn't going to confront him, not until I had tools sharper than anger. So I did what every underestimated woman eventually learns to do. I gathered evidence. By noon, I had copied the messages, screenshots, receipts, and legal documents onto a flash drive and hid it inside the sewing box under my grandmother's thimble. And then, fate intervened. As I stepped out of the house to clear my head, a black Mercedes SUV pulled slowly up to the curb. The window rolled down, and there he was. Rafael Cortez. The same controlled expression. The same silver hair. The same presence that commanded attention without raising his voice. Señora Vargas, he said, as though my name was a verdict. We need to talk. My heart leapt into my throat. How do you get in? He said. Not rudely, not forcefully, simply as a man who wasn't used to hearing no. Against every instinct that had kept me cautious my whole life, I opened the door and sat inside. The leather smelled of cedar and citrus. Clean, safe, sharp. Raphael handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single photograph. Marcela and Carmina sitting in a lawyer's office. With them, Alejandro. The date on the timestamp was last week. Your husband, Raphael said, is attempting to transfer your home into his mother's name. My fingers clenched the photo. How do you know? He looked at me with eyes that did not waver. Because the notary involved has forged documents for the Vargas family before, and I own that notary's building. I stared at him, speechless. Raphael leaned slightly closer, his voice lowering with intention. They plan to strip you of everything, and they expect you to crumble before you fight. My pulse hammered. Why are you helping me? His jaw tightened, just enough for me to see something flicker behind his eyes. Because men like Alejandro disgust me, and because women like you deserve better than to be erased. In that moment, sitting beside a man who spoke truths I'd been too afraid to face, I felt something ignite inside me, a resolve I had never allowed myself to feel. Raphael's gaze hardened with quiet certainty. Señora Vargas, he said, Tell me everything, from the beginning. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt safe enough to let my voice rise. This was the moment I stopped being afraid. And the moment the revenge began. Revenge does not begin with violence or shouting. It begins with silence. Strategic, heavy, deliberate. The kind of silence that says, I see you. I know what you're doing. And I'm no longer the woman you think you can break. That silence followed me home after I left Raphael's car. I walked into the house with the steadiness of someone carrying hidden fire. Alejandro wasn't home yet. The living room was exactly as he'd left it. His boots thrown beside the sofa, yesterday's coffee mug still stained on the counter, the faint scent of the unfamiliar perfume lingering in the hallway like an unwanted guest. I stared at his things, the way someone would study the belongings of a stranger. Curious, detached, already preparing to let them go. I placed my purse on the table and pulled out the photograph Raphael had given me. Alejandro, Carmina, Marcela, all seated in a lawyer's office with polite smiles, as though they weren't planning to steal the ground beneath my feet. I set it down next to the folder I'd stolen from the truck. Evidence, proof, weapons. And then I waited. It wasn't long before Alejandro arrived. The moment he came through the door, slamming it harder than necessary, I knew something was wrong. He tossed his keys onto the side table and dragged a hand through his hair. Traffic was hell, he muttered, though I hadn't asked. He didn't meet my eyes. Dinner ready? I haven't cooked yet, I said calmly. He turned, confused, almost offended. Why not? I was busy. Busy doing what? His tone had an edge, sharp, impatient, the tone of a man used to obedience. I simply looked at him, not angrily, not fearfully, just looked. And something in that quiet gaze made him shift uncomfortably. Well, he said after a moment, tugging at his collar, I'm starving. Make something simple. He walked upstairs without another word, but he paused in the middle of the staircase, as if he could sense the shift in the air, the shift in me. He turned slightly, eyeing me with suspicion. Did anyone stop by today? Instead of answering, I asked, why? His eyes narrowed, just a fraction. Then he shook his head. Forget it. And he disappeared into the bedroom. If Raphael had taught me anything, it was this. You don't warn a man like Alejandro that you know his secrets. You let him reveal himself. While he showered, I moved quietly through the house. I opened windows to air out the perfume scent. I collected the burner phone from the sewing drawer and placed it beside the photo and legal documents. Evidence lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. When he returned, hair damp, shirt half-buttoned, he frowned at the display on the table. What's all this? He asked, nodding toward the papers. Bills, I lied, effortlessly. I'm organizing them. He didn't walk closer, didn't inspect them. He only blinked in confusion, as if my composure made him uneasy. The evening passed without incident, but Alejandro watched me the way a hunter watches a forest when the birds stop singing. Alert, tense, waiting for something to move. That was good. Let him wonder. Let him feel the cold draft of uncertainty. Let him suspect the storm was near, without knowing where it would strike. But he wasn't my target for the first blow. His mother was. The next morning, while Alejandro left for work early, too early, I got dressed in my simplest clothes. Dark jeans and a cream blouse, nothing that suggested confrontation. With the flash drive in my purse and the folder tucked beneath my arm, I drove across San Antonio to the Vargas family home, a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion Alejandro's father had built before his business collapsed and Carmina rewrote history to blame everyone but herself. I parked on the street. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. I walked up the driveway, ignoring the twist in my stomach. Before I could reach the porch, the door opened. Carmina stood there in a velvet robe, her hair in tight curlers, holding a mug of champurrado as though she hadn't planned to knife me metaphorically in 2 days. "What do you want?" she snapped. "It's 7 in the morning. "I need to talk," I said, "about the house." Her face drained of color, but only for a split second, quick enough that most people would have missed it. She didn't miss that I saw it. She stepped outside and shut the door behind her, as though she didn't want whoever was inside to hear. "We're not discussing this here," she hissed. "Whatever nonsense you think you know," I interrupted softly. "I know everything." The mug in her hand trembled. She tightened her grip until her knuckles whitened. "You know nothing," she spat. "Alejandro told us you were too meek to question anything." I tilted my head. Is that what he said? Before or after he went to Guerra and Campos to draft the property transfer? The shock on her face was a perfect still frame, delicious almost. "How dare you? How dare you?" I whispered, leaning forward just enough for my words to strike deep. "You planned to throw me out of my own home. You, who has never lifted a finger to earn $1 in your life. You were going to take what I paid for." Carmina's lips flattened into a bitter line. "Alejandro deserves better than you." "Yet, he chose me," I answered evenly. "And now he's trying to erase that choice. But here's the problem with your plan." I pulled the photograph from my purse and placed it into her trembling hand. "I'm not as blind as you think." She stared at it, at herself, Marcella, and Alejandro at the lawyer's office, her jaw tightening. "Where did you get this?" "Someone who doesn't like men treating their wives as disposable. That man," she hissed through clenched teeth, "has no right to interfere. He had every right the moment your son humiliated me in public." For a moment, she simply stood there, breathing hard, the arrogance stripped away. Then she tried a different tactic. Control. "Listen to me, Emilia," she said, lowering her voice into something almost gentle. "We can fix this. You can walk away quietly. No one needs to know." I smiled, slow, measured, a smile that felt like the turning of a knife. "They will know," I said. "Everyone will, but not yet." I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a whisper, meant only for her. "This is your warning, Carmina. The only warning you get." Her eyes widened, and, for the first time in our 10 years together, I saw something in them that had never been directed at me before. Fear. "By the time this is over," I added, You will wish you had never touched a single brick of my house. And I walked away, not quickly, not triumphantly, but with lethal calm. The first blow had landed, right where it would hurt most, not in her pride, but in her certainty. And certainty, once cracked, collapses fast. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Raphael. Good. Now, step 2 begins. If the first blow was meant to shake them, step 2 was meant to split them open. Raphael didn't tell me everything at once. Men like him never reveal more than necessary. But he guided me with precision, as if he had already mapped out the battlefield long before I even realized I was standing in the middle of it. The message he sent after I confronted Carmina contained only an address and a time. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Come alone. Bring everything. The address was a glass building downtown near the Riverwalk, familiar to anyone who worked in finance or law. When I arrived the next morning, clutching my purse filled with evidence, Raphael was already there, standing beside a man in a charcoal suit who looked like he'd swallowed a law book at birth. Señora Vargas, Raphael greeted me with that calm weight that made my pulse steady instead of race. This is attorney Luis Cardinal. He specializes in fraudulent transfers and marital asset concealment. Luis nodded, extending a folder. I've reviewed what Mr. Cortez sent me. Your husband committed enough violations to bury him under litigation for a decade. I blinked. You already looked at the documents. Raphael's jaw tightened. I anticipated you would need help. The lawyer gestured for us to sit. The Vargas family's plan was simple. Transfer the house before the wedding, then serve you separation papers. They'd claim you abandoned the marriage, which would weaken your claim to community assets. But they made one fatal mistake. His voice lowered, almost with satisfaction. They left a paper trail. He spread the evidence across the table like cards in a deadly game. Receipts, draft agreements, text messages from the burner phone. This is enough to open a civil case, freeze all their asset transfers, and have a judge issue an injunction preventing them from touching the property. Relief washed over me, but it was cold, not warm, like ice settling into cracks. And Alejandro? I asked. He used marital funds to pay for his affair, Luis said. Documented. That's misappropriation. And the attempted transfer without your consent is fraud. He could lose everything. Raphael's eyes flicked toward me, assessing my reaction. I held his gaze, steady. What do I need to do? Just sign the order to initiate the freeze, the attorney said. We'll handle the rest. My hand didn't even tremble when I signed. For the first time, I felt like the pen belonged to me, and not to the expectations others had placed on me for decades. Raphael leaned closer. Once the freeze hits, he'll panic. They all will. Let them. It's part of the process. And then what? I asked. His eyes narrowed with a quiet intensity. Then they fight back. And we crush them where it hurts most. Publicly and legally. It didn't take long. That afternoon, the freeze order went through. The Vargas accounts locked. The transfer halted. Their access to lines of credit suspended. By 4 p.m., My phone exploded with calls from unknown numbers, from Marcella's friends, from cousins who suddenly remembered my existence. I ignored them all. Then, finally, Alejandro called. I let it ring until the last second, then answered. His voice came through ragged, furious, desperate. Emilia, what did you do? What I should have done a long time ago. They froze everything. We can't access the accounts. The lawyer said it's because of you. Yes, I said softly. Because of me. Why? He shouted. Why would you do this to your own family? My family? I repeated. Or yours? Silence. A dangerous silence. Then he exploded. You're going to fix this. You hear me? I'm coming home. Don't go anywhere. The line cut. Raphael, sitting across from me, lifted an eyebrow. He's rattled. He sounds dangerous, I admitted. Good, Raphael said simply. Let him come to you. It's time for the truth to come out in the open. When Alejandro arrived that evening, he didn't walk into the house. He stormed in, slamming the door so hard the walls shuddered. Where are you? He barked, his footsteps shaking the floor. I stepped out of the kitchen, calm, collected, the flash drive in my hand like a silent shield. The moment he saw me, his face twisted with a fury I had only glimpsed once before. The night he'd thrown his beer bottle at the wall during an argument we don't talk about. You went behind my back, he spat. You stole my documents. Our documents, I corrected. Our house, our marriage, our life. Don't play smart with me, he snapped, stepping closer. You signed those papers weeks ago. My jaw locked. No, Alejandro, that's where you slipped. I never signed anything. His eyes flickered, barely, but enough for me to see the crack. So, you forged my signature. He flinched. I pressed the attack. And you forged the timestamps, the notary logs, and the spousal consent line. Alejandro shoved a hand through his hair, pacing like a trapped wolf. You don't know what you're talking about. I reached into my pocket and held up the flash drive. This says otherwise. His face went pale. What is that? Proof? Proof of what? Your affair, your fraud, your theft. His voice trembled, not with guilt, but with fear. Who helped you? He demanded. That man from the wedding? Him? I didn't answer. Alejandro barked a sharp, humorless laugh. You think someone like Rafael Cortez cares about you? He's using you, Emilia. You're nothing to him. I felt the insult strike, but not deeply, not anymore. He cares enough to help me protect what's mine. Nothing is yours, he shouted, slamming his fist against the wall. You think I'll let you humiliate me? Destroy our family? I will fight you with everything I have. No, I said quietly. You won't. He froze. Because you no longer have anything. That's when the doorbell rang. Sharp, piercing, deadly. Alejandro stiffened. Who is that? I stepped back. The person who's going to explain your future to you. The door opened. Attorney Luis stepped in first, followed by two officers with badge lanyards, civil enforcement. Not criminal, but serious enough to make Alejandro's face drain of blood. Mr. Vargas, Luis said professionally, you have been served. He handed Alejandro a thick stack of documents, fraud allegations, injunction orders, demands for disclosure. Alejandro flipped through them, his hands shaking. This is a joke. It's legally binding, Luis replied. Failure to comply will escalate this to criminal court. Alejandro looked at me, really looked, and, for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen. Fear, not of losing me, but of losing control. You did this, he whispered, voice cracking. You... No, I corrected. You did this. I just stopped letting you hide it. He lunged toward me, fury overtaking his restraint. But before he could take a step, Raphael appeared behind the officers, stepping into the house as if it belonged to him. Alejandro froze mid-breath. Raphael's voice was a low, lethal promise. Touch her, and I will dismantle everything you have left, brick by brick. Alejandro's shoulders sagged. His jaw shook. He lowered his gaze. He was defeated, not by Raphael's threat, but by the truth. His truth. Finally, standing in the open, the confrontation had ended. The war had not. But its outcome had already shifted. This time, the Vargas family weren't hunters. They were prey, and dawn was coming. Reckonings don't arrive with fairness. They arrive with consequence. And on the morning, everything finally collapsed for the Vargas family. The sun rose over San Antonio with a brightness that felt almost cruel, merciless, clear, exposing every crack they had tried to plaster over with pride and gold-plated lies. The enforcement order was approved at 8:17 a.m. I know the exact time because Raphael called me the moment the judge signed it. His voice, steady as always, carried a gravity that felt like closure wrapped in steel. Senora Vargas, he said, it's done. They're about to be served. I didn't have to ask what he meant. I simply closed my eyes, breathed in slowly, and whispered, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "This next part, you need to see." 30 minutes later, I drove to the Vargas mansion. The palace Carmina swore was built on legacy and honor, though everyone in town knew it was built on loans and pretense. When I turned onto their street, I saw the convoy before I even reached the house. 2 sheriff vehicles, a repossession truck, an appraisal van, and Raphael's black SUV, parked like a sentinel in the middle of it all. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains and half-open doors, eager for a spectacle. The Vargas family had ruled this neighborhood socially for years. Today, they were the main attraction. As I stepped out of my car, Raphael walked toward me, his calm presence cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Stay next to me," he said quietly. "You'll want a clear view, but not too close." "I'm not afraid," I murmured. "I know," he replied, almost with something like pride. The front door burst open just then, and Carmina stumbled onto the porch in a silk robe and slippers, her hair still pinned from a failed attempt at dignity. "You can't do this," she screeched at the officers. "This is my home. You have no right." The sheriff, a broad man with a patient but unmoving expression, held up the court order. "Ma'am, this house is under seizure due to fraudulent transfer attempts and outstanding debts. You have 30 minutes to remove your personal belongings." No! Carmina wailed. This is a mistake. My son will fix this. Alejandro! Alejandro appeared behind her, shirt half-buttoned, eyes bloodshot, face gaunt. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He looked at the officers, then at Raphael, then at me, and something inside him crumpled. Emilia, he whispered, stepping down the porch stairs. Please. That single word held a lifetime of manipulation, of excuses, of rehearsed remorse, but it no longer touched me. Please what? I asked. Undo this? Yes, he said, voice trembling. We can fix this. You're my wife. Don't do this to us. You did this to yourself, I answered simply. He flinched as though I'd struck him. Marcella rushed out next, mascara smeared from crying, holding 2 armfuls of clothing and designer handbags. This is insane, she screamed. Emilia, be reasonable. You're ruining our family. You tried to ruin mine, I said, my voice steady as a stone wall. And my sanity, and my safety, and my home. Her face twisted in fury. You were never one of us. Exactly, I replied, and thank God for that. The officers entered the house with the appraisers. Through the open door, I could hear them logging items, artwork, electronics, jewelry, everything the Vargas family flaunted as evidence of superiority. Carmina grabbed Alejandro's arm. Say something, she hissed. Do something! But Alejandro could barely stand upright. The weight of everything, his affair, his fraud, his lies, was dragging him down like an anchor tied to his feet. Emilia, he whispered again, desperation soaking every syllable. Don't let them take everything. We'll be left with nothing. You've already taken everything from me, I said. My trust, my dignity, my place in this family. This, I gestured to the mansion behind him, is just the last illusion. His face contorted, but no words came out. The officers escorted them down the porch steps, guiding them to the driveway where their piles of belongings sat in plastic bins, like the remnants of a yard sale gone wrong. Carmina sobbed into a monogrammed handkerchief. Marcella cursed at anyone who dared to look her way. Alejandro stood motionless, staring at the pavement as if expecting it to swallow him. Raphael leaned toward me slightly. This, he said, is justice. Not revenge. Justice. I nodded, though the line between the two felt thin in that moment. Thin, but necessary. Once the house was fully emptied, the sheriff handed Raphael a clipboard. As representative for the acquiring party, he said, sign here. Raphael signed with the authority of a man accustomed to closing multi-million-dollar deals. Then he handed the pen to me. You sign too, he said. I hesitated. Why me? Because you're the rightful owner, he replied softly. And this is your closure. My hand didn't shake, not even a little, as I wrote my name. When the ink dried, the house was no longer the Vargas family's fortress of pride. It was evidence. Evidence of their downfall. Evidence of my survival. Raphael turned to the family. As of today, he said, his voice carrying across the driveway, you are barred from entering this property. Any attempt to return will result in removal by law enforcement. Carmina screamed something unintelligible. Marcella burst into fresh tears. Alejandro finally looked at me. and the defeat in his eyes was so complete, I almost didn't recognize the man I married 30 years ago. Was it worth it? He asked, voice cracking. Destroying us? I didn't destroy you, I answered. You built your life on lies. I just stopped holding up the walls. He sank onto the curb, head in his hands. And I realized something. Standing there in the rising Texas heat, I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no triumph. Just peace. A peace I had never known. Raphael placed a hand lightly on my back. A gesture not possessive, but supportive. Steady, grounding. You're free now, he said. What will you do next? I looked at the mansion one last time. The place where I'd cried, cooked, waited, hoped, and felt it fade into the distance, irrelevant. I'm going to start over, I said, far from the Vargas name, far from who I used to be. Raphael nodded, a faint smile brushing the edge of his lips. If you ever need help rebuilding, he said quietly, you know where to find me. As the officers escorted the Vargas family away, shouting and crying into the empty morning air, I walked toward my car, every step lighter than the last. The past had burned behind me. The future was open sky. And for the first time in decades, my life, my choices, belonged solely to me. The end. And that, mis queridos amigos, is how my story came to its end. Not with a miracle, not with revenge for revenge's sake, but with truth finally taking the place it had been denied for far too long. When a person spends years living in silence, in shadows, in self-doubt, the moment they finally step into their own strength feels almost unreal, like learning how to breathe again. That is what freedom tasted like for me. Now, I want to turn the question toward you. Tell me, from your heart, do you believe I did the right thing? Was reclaiming my home, my dignity, and my life an act of necessary justice? Or was it too harsh, even after everything Alejandro and his family did? Some of you may say I should have forgiven, that 30 years of marriage deserved another chance. Others may say that letting go was the only way to protect what was left of my spirit. I want to hear what you think, your experiences, your stories, your truth. Because sometimes the wisdom we need most comes from those who have lived through their own storms. And tell me one more thing, queridos. Would you like to know what happened next? After the house was taken? After the paper were signed? After I walked away? Did I rebuild my life here in Texas? Did I ever speak to Alejandro again? And what about Raphael? Did he remain only an unexpected ally? Or something more? If you want a continuation, let me know in the comments. I read every word you share with me. Don't forget to like this video if the story touched you. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. On the screen now, you'll see a box. Click it to watch one of our other most powerful stories. Thank you for staying with me until the end. May your days be gentle, your nights peaceful, and your courage unshakable.